Hello and welcome to Decision NYC with Ben Max. I'm Ben Max, your host and the executive editor of Gotham Gazette. The 2021 New York City election season is well underway, and it's poised to be the most significant municipal election in decades. All of city government is on the ballot this year, and because so few incumbents are eligible to run for re-election due to term limits, New Yorkers are electing many new office holders and the next roster of leadership for our city. There will be a new mayor of New York City elected here in 2021, as well as a new city controller, several new borough presidents, and many new city council members. And that's not all that's on the ballot. Several incumbents are eligible for and seeking re-election, including the city's public advocate. There's also a very crowded and competitive race for Manhattan District Attorney, and still more. Party primaries are set for June, and the general election will culminate on November 2nd. This is the first full set of municipal elections that will feature both early voting as well as the new ranked choice voting system. Ranked choice voting only applies to party primaries and special elections. We'll have a separate show just on ranked choice voting. This city election cycle would, of course, be of importance under normal circumstances, but it is quite clearly going to make or break the city's recovery from the damages of the COVID-19 pandemic and its many impacts on health, families, jobs, education, housing, and much, much more. It's also important to note, of course, that the city faced many crises even before COVID, and several of those have only gotten worse. So it's an important time of choosing here in New York City, and we're pleased to bring you this series of interviews with candidates running for citywide offices, mayor, public advocate, controller, as well as interviews with candidates for other offices like borough president and district attorney, and there will be debates eventually. These one-on-one conversations will help you to get to know the candidates better, learn about their platforms, their backgrounds, their vision, where they stand on key issues, and what they want to do if you choose them for the office they're seeking. So we hope this and other interviews will help you sort through your many choices and make informed decisions when it's time to vote. So today's interview, joining me now by Zoom, is Andrew Yang, a Democratic candidate for mayor of New York City. Andrew, thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, Ben, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. And thank you for all you do for local news. People may not know, but check him out at the Gotham Gazette. We have to do more to get people information about what's happening in their community. And you've been doing it for years. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Thanks. So for those who might be unfamiliar with you, how do you capture in just a couple minutes sort of your background before jumping into this race for mayor? We'll obviously spend the bulk of our time together on your pitch for the city and why you want to be the next mayor, but give us a little overview of your background.
Well, Ben, when I think about what got me to this point, I could talk about my career, but I'm actually going to go back a bit further. I was born in upstate New York to immigrant parents, and then they moved to Westchester County. And so I grew up in the shadow of New York City, like seeing New York City as the center of the universe. And then I came here as a 21-year-old law student and never left. I met my wife, Evelyn, about 10 years later. She's from Queens. We now have a son in public school here. So New York City has been so good to me. It's given me everything. And I've had the kind of career that I literally could not have conceived of when I showed up here 25 years ago as a 21-year-old student. And what I want to do is I want to preserve and sustain New York City as a place that enables people to build the kind of life, career, business that they want for themselves. And it's all at stake, as you said, in this election, because there's no guarantee that New York City snaps back and recovers the way we want it to. I believe I can help.
Say a little bit more about your work experience. You haven't worked in city government on the campaign trail so far. You've talked about that in some ways as a positive, but talk a little bit about what couple of private sector experiences you think most prepare you to be mayor of New York City.
So I went to law school here in New York at Columbia. I practiced law for a little while, and then I left to start a business that did not work out. And I kept working in early stage companies for the next 10 years or so. Eventually, I became the CEO of an education company that grew to become a bit bigger, happily. But I think that's really the way I tend to see the world, is as someone who ran a small business. And if you run a small business in New York or any place, your customers just want you to deliver what you say you're going to deliver. They don't care particularly about any excuses or really about your politics ever. And I think that's what a lot of New Yorkers want right now from our agencies, our bureaucracies. We just want things to work better. And so if you're a small business operator, as I was for 6.5 years, and again, that business did grow to become quite significant, you have to make the numbers work. And you have to try and identify people that can grow with your organization and can take on big responsibilities. But you also have to see the problems for what they are. And right now, if you look around New York City, we are down 600,000 jobs, 27,000 lives. Like we've lost friends, family, neighbors. Over 500,000 people have gotten the coronavirus, including me. And we're missing 60 million tourists who used to support about 300,000 of the missing jobs. Violent crime is up 94%. Hundreds of thousands of people have left New York City and may not come back. So if you look at those problems, those are not political problems. Those are operational problems. And what we need to do is we need to activate as many parts of New York City as possible, both inside and outside of government, to get back the 82% of missing commuters, the 60 million missing tourists, so that we can actually help some of our small businesses survive and reopen.
So you're in a field where the leading contenders are a lot of folks who either held elected office or worked in government. There's also obviously a very high profile banking executive, nonprofit executive, and many other candidates. When it comes to being able to take over city government and lead this massive operation that is city government with over 300,000 employees, a $90+ billion budget, what sets you apart there? What skills do you have that would make you the best leader of this massive operation that is city government?
So first, again, I run this private growth company that became #1 in the country. And so that helped form me. But then after that, I started a national nonprofit from the ground up that served thousands of people and stakeholders over time. And when you run a nonprofit, what you have to do is you have to set a vision, and then you have to have people rally around that vision. Sometimes when they may have a different interest. And so I think that training is actually a lot of what the city needs right now. We need to have a positive vision and identify folks who want to head in that direction. Sometimes, it might be a little bit harder to get people on board, but anyone who's run a nonprofit, I think, knows what I'm talking about, that you need to be able to work with all sorts of people. And then after that, I ran for president, which is how many New Yorkers know me. And I ran for president on a vision of trying to humanize an economy that was turning on more and more people. And that campaign ended up activating millions of Americans. I am so excited that now cash relief is something that our federal government is adopting, and millions of New Yorkers will be getting $1,400 checks in part because of that effort. So if you look at that set of experiences over the last, at this point now, it's like 15 years or so, I think that's the kind of experience that we need to bring the city back.
Now you had a good bit of success, as you were indicating, with running Manhattan Prep, the test prep company, and then selling it to a larger company. But some of this other efforts you've had have either underperformed your expectations and your goals, or as you said, some of your early ventures just didn't work out at all. Can you pitch yourself to New York City voters as a successful entrepreneur? Do you consider yourself to have been very successful as one?
I think the best of entrepreneurs are trying to solve meaningful problems, have helped elevate other people in their careers and their work, and also have organizations that have stood the test of time because the entrepreneur himself was not, the end all be all. And so if you look at Manhattan Prep, it's serving thousands of students to this day. My nonprofit is still going strong. And even my presidential campaign gave rise to a nonprofit that's fighting for cash relief. So I'm really proud of the impact I've had, and frankly, of the problems I've been trying to solve. Do I think I've done enough? I always want to do more. It's one reason why I'm running for mayor, is I think I can do a lot of good for the greatest city in the world.
So someone comes up to you on the street, they're about to go into work or something, and they only have a minute, and they say, all right, you seem energetic. I know you from the presidential campaign. Now you're running for mayor. What are a couple things you want to do for New York City? Like sell me in 1 minute on your big ideas. What are your couple?
Oh, 1 minute, Ben. Such a challenge. Okay, #1, we need to get our city's economy open again and working. Number two, we need to make it more equitable. And I'm running on an anti-poverty platform that includes $1 billion in cash relief for the poorest New Yorkers. I want to get broadband to some of the 29% of New Yorkers who don't have it. I'm establishing a people's bank that will help get more people access to basic financial services. And number three, we have to improve the confidence of people in the city that right now has been shaken badly, in part because of the rise in violent crime, 94% year over year, and the sense that we just don't have the degree of safety and security when we're walking our own streets as we used to.
What's the number one thing you'd point to for why you think violent crime jumped so high in 2020 in New York City? This was a nationwide trend. Do you think there was something unique about it here? Do you think it was the same broad reasons across the country? What do you get at there when you think about why after, there were different years where things went up, went down, but the trend really for decades has been down, and then we saw this really big jump last year.
If you lose 700,000 jobs, now 600,000 jobs in a community like New York City, and you have an unemployment rate that's twice the national average, there are going to be a lot of people that are very uncertain or insecure about their futures, and they may end up acting in very, very negative ways. One of the quotes that Jumaane Williams said to me at an event that now, I say everywhere is that hurt people hurt people. That this city is badly wounded. And that if you are struggling and you have a negative impulse, and there aren't, frankly, dozens of people on that subway car, on that street that help insulate you from acting on a negative impulse, then you may act on it, particularly if you are fueled by real material needs and deprivation, which more New Yorkers are, because people are struggling. So in a way, and as you suggested, this is not solely a New York City phenomenon. I mean, it's happening in other environments. But just there's so much struggle and pain right now, and that ends up manifesting in really dark and negative behaviors. And I will say on a personal level, anti-Asian incidents and violence is up 900% to the extent we have numbers for that. And that's something that many people feel, including me, feel very, very deeply and painfully. But I have the same approach there, which is look, there's just so much pain and struggle right now. And if we can ease that, then it will make some of these problems better.
But it doesn't sound like you think there are policing answers to this. And where does policing fit in?
The concern I'd have on the policing level is that the clearance rate, or the rates at which they solve crimes, is declining. And so if you have rising crime and declining clearance rates, it's a terrible combination. And so we need to hold police accountable, one, for any civil rights abuses that may be inflicted upon New Yorkers, particularly New Yorkers of color, but two, they need to solve crimes. We need to feel confidence that if someone does commit a crime in New York City, that they'll be apprehended eventually, and that they won't, frankly, be free to do something else very negative. So there are a number of things that I've suggested I think would help immensely, including a civilian police commissioner who's independent of the NYPD culture, but also having new officers live in New York City. We require that of employees of other city agencies right now. And if you can imagine having new officers in New York City, they would understand the communities that they're protecting and serving better and more natively. But also they'd be commuting to work probably on the subway or via public transportation. They'd even be off duty, just walking around. And so you'd have hundreds of people frankly, who are able to elevate the public's ability to respond to negative occurrences or crimes if they do happen in their community.
Are there other ways you think policing needs to change in the city, since we're on that subject? Are there ways sort of on the other end of the spectrum? There's conversation that police have pulled back too much because they resent some of the political decisions that have been made, some of the laws that have been passed. Do you believe that? Do you think there's room for, in some ways, a more aggressive police force, but with some of the culture changes you've previously mentioned?
So again, you have to do multiple things at once. The civil rights abuses in the NYPD are real, and you can see that in the hundreds of millions of dollars that the city spends settling lawsuits against abusive police officers every year. So it's not like an isolated occurrence. It actually is a systemic problem. But at the same time, police need to feel like they can do their jobs and do them actively without fearing for their career anytime they get out of their police car because of like a negative social media video or something along those lines. And I agree with you that right now the NYPD's relationship with the current mayor is not facilitating that kind of attitude. That when I've spoken to folks who are close to the situation, they say that the NYPD is not policing as actively as they have at other points in time, and that's something that hopefully a new mayor can change.
Come back to your run for president leading into your run for mayor. Why do you think, what do you point to in terms of why you were able to sort of build a movement on your presidential run? And now you have, these very strong approval ratings, very strong likability ratings, and leading the early polls in the mayoral race, which I'm wondering what you attribute that to, if you think it's, sort of the broader name recognition from your presidential campaign. But first, what do you think about you people responded to so positively? How do you boil that down?
That's a great question, Ben.
You would like that one, yes.
Well, no, I mean, because genuinely, like, it's interesting for me to reflect on. I have not been a public figure for that long, and I think people sense that I'm fighting for them. When I ran for president, I advocated giving everyone $1,000 a month, which I thought was the right move. And people initially, frankly, mocked that proposal and said, like, ha ha, like there's this person, Andrew Yang, who wants to give everyone $1,000 a month. And then here we are, not that long afterwards, when a majority of Americans now agree with a version of universal basic income. And we've sent out multiple rounds of cash relief during the pandemic. Frankly, I genuinely am just a person who wants to help. Unfortunately, the trust in various like elected officials and whatnot, I believe has eroded over time. And so if someone sees another person who is trying to help, then they respond to that. They say, oh, like, I think this person genuinely wants to improve my way of life. And I genuinely do. Like, I want to improve the way of life for everyone in our city. And I think there are really powerful things that we can do to help. And one thing I'll return to that I mentioned earlier, 12% of New Yorkers right now don't have a bank account. And so they're spending hundreds of dollars they don't have every month or year on check cashers, money lenders, pawn shops that are exploiting them. And so if we're the world's financial capital and you have hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers getting exploited in this way, we should change it. So I'm launching a People's Bank that will help get bank accounts to folks who right now don't think that there's a place for them in our financial system. Now, that's not something that, frankly, there are that many interest groups fighting for, because the folks I'm talking about, aren't necessarily able to participate as political activists because they're just trying to make ends meet. But it's the right thing to do. It's going to help our city, help our economy, help these people and their families. And so people sense that about me, is that I'm not someone who's walked around and then frankly just taking cues from like a particular person who's like pushing for a policy. I'm just trying to provide.
And one of the tenets of your campaign now as mayor is not quite universal basic income. There's reasons for that in terms of not being able to control taxation and some of the things that would need to really make your presidential campaign proposal happen on the city level. But you have a basic income proposal for a significant number of New Yorkers, about 500,000, who are in the deepest poverty, to get them at least roughly $2,000 a year. You've said that you would try to bring in philanthropic funding as well to pay for that, but you're opposed to tax increases in New York. How do you square that? I mean, is there a way that you would be able to bring in enough private funding to really scale this proposal? Or do you think as mayor, it's just not something that you'd really try to scale to that larger degree?
Oh, I would love to scale it. And I think most New Yorkers know that if I had my druthers, we'd be giving everyone $1,000 a month, but we don't have that capacity.
But only if it could come from the federal level.
No. I mean, but the city does not have that capacity, and so we have to be more targeted and tactical. Mm-hmm. I also want to return to a question or a statement you had, Ben. I am not against higher taxes in New York City. I mean, there are clearly people that have been incredibly successful that can afford to pay more and pay their fair share. And some of the things I'm proposing will likely end up being revenue generating and effectively higher taxes on folks who can afford them. But my goal is to start with a $1 billion commitment to alleviate extreme poverty in New York City. I think we can grow from there, and I think we can do so in a way that's going to help solve several problems at once. So one of my goals is to help small businesses recover, and I would like for this buying power that we're going to put into the hands of New Yorkers who are struggling to go to locally owned small businesses rather than Amazon or big company X that doesn't have as much value flow directly to New York families and communities. But we're committing $1 billion a year, and I'd love to see it grow.
But to grow, you would need philanthropic funding, as you've said, or how does it grow?
I think philanthropic funding would be one source. One thing that I'm very excited about is that it looks like we have at least a bit of a bridge operationally where this latest relief bill is going to include $6 billion for New York City, which should plug our budget hole for at least a year. Then I think an infrastructure bill will follow. But in order to grow, you'd be looking at a combination of philanthropic sources and city funding.
And what kind of philanthropic sources are you envisioning?
I'm happy to say I've talked to some folks who are very interested in universal basic income and cash relief and various things, and they see New York City as an ideal place to send this message. It's one reason why I was endorsed, or I have been endorsed, by Martin Luther King's son, Martin Luther King III, who sees New York City as an ideal environment to put some of his father's beliefs and policies into practice. There are other people that are philanthropically inclined that want to see this succeed. But I'm going to suggest that this is one reason why I think I would make an excellent mayor, is that I'm not going to confine myself to the agencies themselves. I mean, we need to get the agencies working, but there's so much talent, so much ingenuity, so much energy in other parts of New York City that don't work for city government. Getting our government working again is mission critical, but we can't stop there. We need to get other people invested in the city's success.
You're focusing a lot of your campaign on people who are struggling the most. And again, that's true pretty much across the board for Democratic candidates, as we'd expect, especially in a city with so much need and so much poverty, even before COVID. But at the same time, you're asking those folks who are in the most need, as well as everybody else, to take a pretty big leap of faith on you, right? As sort of an unknown quantity locally. For better and worse, we've got, like I said, some elected officials and some longtime city servants where we can sort of really pick apart their commitment to local civic life and government. They've got negatives, they've got positives. But this is a pretty big leap of faith you're asking people to take in you to turn over the keys of city government at such a perilous time with so much on the line for them, don't you think?
Well, Ben, that's one way of looking at it. But another way of looking at it would be, if you think that our government agencies and bureaucracies have failed to meet this moment and have not been operating to your satisfaction for years and years, do you really think that taking someone who's been embedded in that system it is going to be safer or riskier depending upon what you think the needs of this time are? I would suggest that having someone with varied experiences who's proven an ability to build relationships with, for example, the president, the vice president, the secretary of transportation, the Senate majority leader, who can activate resources for New York City, that is a safer bet. You know what I mean? That taking someone who's been rattling around these systems that have not been coming through for us.
Point taken for sure. And I think that appeals to a lot of people. But at the same time, you're asking people to also let you manage city government. And so talk about your growth as a manager, as a leader. There have been a number of stories, especially during your presidential campaign, about both in your prior entrepreneurial activities and in the campaign, about misogynistic culture in these organizations, about challenges with sort of managing as things scale up. Are those things you want to assuage people are no longer issues? Are you taking some kind of different approach in your mayoral campaign to make sure that those things don't happen? how have you sort of grown and changed on that front and ensuring that past issues don't come up again?
Ben, I'm very proud of the work we've done in each of my organizations, elevating people of every background, including amazing women leaders. And there are incredible women who worked on my presidential who are now helping to lead my mayoral campaign. And so really the question is, how are we going to get the city heading in a better direction? And I'm someone who's going to get the most talented, dedicated people working in City Hall and in these agencies that, frankly, in my mind, could use people with very deep government experience. And I would very much want to surround myself with folks who've been working in these environments because these are very complex organizations and you need folks who know how to move bureaucracies in a particular direction. But we also need to enlist people who have industry experience, who might be from outside New York City. And I'm the kind of person that just wants the best people around me and wants to create a culture where they can do their best work. They're not going to be fearful of, frankly, like a negative press cycle or that their mayor is going to throw them under the bus if someone's mad about something. I'm going to be their heat shield. I'm going to stand up front and say, hey, if you have any, anyone you want to ask questions of, you can ask me. And then if there's credit to be given, it can go to my team. That's the kind of environment we're going to need if we're going to get the best people involved in leading the city's recovery.
All right, we're running low on our time here. I have three last quick questions for you. We have to unfortunately keep them quick. You voted for Cynthia Nixon in the Democratic primary in 2018. Do you think New York State would be in better shape today if she had won that election?
I liked a lot of what Cynthia had to say and to offer. And you can't sort of imagine an alternate version of the world. You got to take the world as it is. But I was excited by her candidacy.
Can you name one thing that excited you about it?
Well, I think that she put her finger on the fact that there was a culture in Albany that she wanted to help shift and change. And I think she was right.
And lastly, with a brief explanation, what letter grade would you give Mayor Bill de Blasio for his tenure?
Oh my gosh, that is so rough, man. This is like putting you in a position to do something that I'm very, very reluctant to do because, I think I'm a positive person and I, dislike throwing rocks at people who are in very, very difficult positions. But I think a lot of New Yorkers are ready for a new mayor, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay. And lastly, a political hero, past or present, someone you consider a role model. Maybe you don't completely agree with them on everything, but who would you name as a political role model or hero of yours?
One of the high points of my campaign for president was meeting Bernie Sanders. I supported him during his 2016 run. He was a political hero of mine. I just thought he was such a fighter for the people, just honest through and through, completely selfless. And then when we met on the trail and he said that he liked me, I felt like a thrill. I felt like I've been blessed by, the Godfather. So he's someone who inspired my presidential run, and so grateful to him for continuing to fight for the people in the Senate. He's someone I've looked up to for a long time.
All right, Andrew Yang, a lot of things we got to talk over, which was good. A lot more to discuss in the coming weeks and months of the campaign, but thanks for taking the time today.
Of course. Thank you, Ben. This was tremendous.
Right. And thank you for watching Decision NYC with Ben Max. Key decisions for New York City voters are coming up in the June primaries and fall general election. There's a lot on the line for all of us and the future of New York City. I hope this conversation and others are helpful to you as you sort through your choices and get ready to vote. I'm Ben Max. See you next time.